Hi guys, and welcome back to another tutorial here. Today we're going to be looking at After Effects. We're going to be looking at making a simple walk cycle. Let's take a look over at the software and we'll give you a little preview of what we're going to be creating today. Just this little superhero character in a repeated run cycle. We've got the puppet pin animation here on the cape to make that flow, make it look like it's made of soft material. And we just got a standard parent-child puppet rig on all of the limbs. This is being designed mainly for use in games animation, so we're making discrete animations as opposed to a long form cartoon animation. But a lot of the same principles will still apply, so you can still use a lot of these techniques in that. So what we're going to do is we're going to start a new project. I won't save anything there. And we don't need to start a new composition yet, but I do have this pre-prepared character that I am just going to drag into After Effects, and we'll see we get our little import window here. It's really important that we set the import kind to composition retain layer sizes. This may start as footage. We want to change it to composition retain layer sizes. That way all of the different layers that we have in Photoshop when we made this character will transfer over. So this makes us a new composition. As you can see here, we get the composition and we got all the layers itself from Photoshop. They're all in there. We don't need to touch those. If we just double click the character himself, we will see that we have all these different pieces and we have all of these layers down below. Note that they have all been named. This is really important when you are making your character in Photoshop and Illustrator, wherever you're making your character. It is really important that you have good naming conventions on these layers so that we know what gets parented to what, and either yourself or another person animating it knows where to go when they want to do a certain thing. So we've got two steps here. We first of all need to change the rotation point of each limb, and then we need to parent each limb to a child object. So the forearm would be connected to the arm would be connected to the torso, etc. Let's see how we do that. If we look at this arm, for example, when I rotate the arm, that arm should rotate around the shoulder up around here, but you can see that it is actually rotating around this little anchor point in the center. We need to change that rotation point so it's up closer to here. To do that, we're going to take this tool, the pan behind tool. Now I'm using an older version of After Effects, so there might be a couple of extra tools in here, but the one you want is this little dotted square with 4 arrows in it. When that's selected, all we need to do is grab that little anchor point and move it up to about here. Now note that I haven't moved up to the very edge of the shoulder, it's more in the middle of the meat of the shoulder, so that now whenever we rotate that round, it looks nice and smooth. If we just control Z there, put it back in its original place, if we go to the forearm now, we will do the same. We will move that pivot point just to about here, again not quite on the edge, but just enough so that we can have a little bit of rotation on that arm without it maybe disconnecting and breaking too much. So we need to do that for every layer. So I won't show everyone on the video. I'll pause the video here in a second and we'll come back with it fully rigged up. But just to show you a few key ones, the torso, whoops, we will not rotate it. We will move the pivot point down just about the waist here. The hips, it can stay roughly where it is. Thighs, they go up again near the top. Wrists can go near the wrists. Head can go down towards the neck. And the cape here will just bring the pivot point of the cape up to just behind the head. We're going to use a different method to animate the cape anyway, but excuse me, for now that will do up there. Okay, I'm going to pause the video. I'm going to finish moving these pivot points, and then we'll come back when they're all moved and we'll move on to the next step. And we are back. So that shouldn't actually take you very long to put all of these into position. Depending on the complexity of your character, it might take longer if you've got more layers. The next thing we want to do now is set it so that when we rotate the likes of the arm here, if I can select the arm, when we rotate the arm, the forearm and the hand should go with it. So we need to set up a parent-child hierarchy. Now this is very, very easy to do. We're just going to come down to our layers list here. And how we work this is we start from the furthest most extremity and then work back towards the torso. So for example, I will start with the hand. You can see this little hand here. And I'm going to connect this to the forearm. So note how we've also got hand R, forearm R, hand L, forearm L to denote which arm it's attached to. So in order to do this, very, very easy. We can just grab this little snail icon here. This is called the pick whip. And we take it from the child object, i.e. the hand, to the parent, which will be the forearm in this case. Then we take the forearm and move it from forearm to bicep. And then we can go from bicep to torso, which is here. Notice how this little column that says none, these will start to fill up with the names of the layers that the current layer is parented to. Now, if you don't see this menu, there's a little button here called toggle switches and modes. You might be seeing something like this instead. Either way, we get that little pick whip. It'll show some different options, but we should still have the pick whip in the parent window. The other method that we can use to connect these up, and if I do this for a leg instead, so I can start here with the toe, and I want to connect this to the heel, so toe L to heel L. I can actually click here, and it will give me a list of all the layers, and I can choose which one I want to connect it to. Instead of using that little swirly pick whip, I can just manually select the layer. So heel L can go to shin L. And if you just click on each layer, if you're not sure what the name is, click on each layer and you'll see that it highlights it for you. One thing to be aware of is if you parent these the wrong way. So I always want to connect from shin to thigh. Again, working from the furthest most extremity of the limb towards the core, towards the torso. So if we do this the wrong way, say for example we connect the forearm L to hand L, that'll be the wrong way around. Don't worry about it. We can just switch this back to none and then do it the right way around. So that should be hand L goes to forearm L. So what difference is this actually making? If I just finish doing the forearm here, forearm goes to bicep L, and bicep L goes to torso. What does this actually do? What is the use of this? If I select the bicep now, if I rotate this, notice how the arm is moving along with it. And it is rotating around that little pivot point. Oh, there's one I actually missed. You can see that I've missed one there. So let's just quickly put that in place. And now with the parenting in place, these will all rotate together like so. And this is the key to animating these characters. We only ever really want to use the rotate tool and we move the limbs into position. So I'm going to pause the video once more. I'm going to finish rigging this up and we'll come back and I will leave this on screen so you can see how this gets rigged. And we are back once more. You can see here I've finished rigging everything up to its parent. If we take a wee quick look at this, we'll see that we have a lot of assets here that would belong to the face, the eyebrows and the pupils and the nose. They just get connected to the head. They all parent just to the head. The head itself goes to the torso. The cape can go to the torso. The torso itself, it will actually be parented to the hips. So the torso, if we rotate it, can move independently so our character can bend over to pick stuff up. And then the hips, everything is connected to the hips. The hips work as sort of the parent object of the entire character. So the hips themselves are one of the few objects that don't actually have a parent above that. Notice we also have layer 0 here. This is just the white background layer. This can be toggled on or off. It's not going to be part of the final character at all. It's just to help us see what's going on. It's easier to see on a white background rather than black. When we go to animate, we'll turn this off. It does not need to be parented to anything. There's one last wee step we can do. We can create controller objects. So, for example, I have both of my pupils here. If I just deselect, I've got 2 pupils. I can move these independently, but this runs the risk of if I move them independently, they can go cross-eyed and it can be hard to keep track. One thing I can do is go to Layer, New, Null Object, and I can rename this. If I right-click and rename, call it Pupil Controller. I can actually instead parent my pupils to this instead of the head. Whoops, press caps lock there. You'll notice if I press caps lock, it hides the preview. So if you see that warning, it's just press caps lock on the keyboard and that will bring it back. So yes, we can parent both of these pupils to the pupil controller, and then the pupil controller itself can be put to the head. Now, before I've done that, let me just set those back to none. The reason being, I actually want to take this pupil controller. You'll see it's just a little square here. I just want to move it up closer to the head. I want to do that before I parent them. So now that I've moved that, it's close to the head. You can put it right on the head if you want, but that can make it possibly harder to see and grab a hold of. Now with that, if I move this around, both eyes will move simultaneously. It can be hard to keep track, or be easier to keep track of those eyes in a similar place. It also means you only need to click one thing instead of 2 to make these move around. So it might save you a little bit of time if you're doing complex face animations. The other place we might want to make a controller object, if we go Layer, New, Null Object, if we place this actually between the ankles, just down here, and we'll call this one just character controller. This one we could actually connect the hips to, and that way, instead of the hips, one of our art assets, being a parent, it just cleans things up a wee bit. There's that caps lock error again. Turn caps lock off. Instead of the hips being a parent, we can have one of these little controller objects as a parent, and it can provide some advantages in terms of moving the character and making them jump up and down. What we can also do is just grab these layers, pull them up to the top of our stack, and just keep all our controller objects together. These are some good practice when you're getting a character to animate. So this guy is ready to go. We're ready to animate him. What I would do at this stage now, we have a composition here just called the same name as the Photoshop file we brought in. I'm going to right click and rename this character rig master. So this character has been set up. He is perfectly rigged, ready to animate, but we do not want to animate on this rig. We want to keep this. And what we'll do is we'll select that composition, hit Control C on our keyboard, Control V to paste. I will make a duplicate of that composition. And what we can do is rename this to walk cycle. The reason we do this, we duplicate it every time. As I say, we're making this for video game assets, say a 2D platformer or something like that. We want to have a discrete jump animation, we want to have a discrete walk animation, a discrete death, attack, idle animation, whatever you want. We're going to have all these separate animations that are called when the controller wants them. So our easiest way to do this is just have separate compositions just with one animation each. And we'll keep this one untouched, nice and pristine, ready to go at all times. Even if you were doing a long form animation, it's good to keep one of these master animations with no actual keyframing on it. So we are ready to animate this guy now. I'm going to close my rig master composition and open the walk cycle one. It looks identical for now. And let's start animating this guy. So this is where it can get a little bit crowded in terms of going between the timeline and the viewport here. One thing I want to do, I want to shrink down this composition. You can see at the minute it is about 16 seconds long. Now when I make a walk cycle, in this case I might make this character run, it doesn't need to be nearly that long. It can be maybe 1 second long. So I'm just going to go composition settings, change that time just to 1 second and 0 additional frames. So here we have hours, minutes, seconds and frames. So just 1 second, 0 frames. That's all we need. And that will condense this back, and now we see the timeline is actually numbered for each frame. So there's going to be a lot of this that we don't actually need to touch for the animation, mainly just the limbs. And we're only going to be working with the rotation property. So the likes of the eyebrows, the hair, we don't really need to touch those, but we will need the forearm, the hand, the bicep, the shins, the toes, etc. So what we're going to do is we're just going to hold control and select all of these. Do we need the cape? We won't touch the cape right now. We're going to animate the cape differently. The forearm and the bicep. We'll select all of these, just excluding the face elements, but we will take the head as well actually. And we're going to press R on our keyboard. This will open up the rotation property. We're going to come to the very start of our timeline, and we are going to hit this little stopwatch, and that will apply a keyframe on every layer that we currently have selected. You'll see here, if I move this across now, a little blue diamond has appeared. That means there's an active keyframe there. So what we're going to do is, at this first frame of animation, we are now going to zoom back in to our character. Just with the rotation tool active, we're going to take each layer and we are going to move each limb. Let me see if I can select that rear thigh there. We may have to select them down here. So where is that thigh R? There it is. We're going to select each limb and move it into its most extreme position in that cycle. So for example here, I'm going to make him where he is at the extent of his run. And I'm really going to exaggerate it here. I won't touch the head for now. I'll leave the head. I'm just going to move these limbs. And then I'm going to go to the very final frame. And I want to make sure that the first frame and the last frame are both in this position. With a walk cycle, with any animation cycle, it's vital that the first frame and the last frame are the same. So in order to put another keyframe in here at this exact position, we have this little diamond icon. So just every layer that has a diamond here at the start, we're going to click this little diamond icon and add one at the end. And you'll see those little diamonds start to appear over here on the right. So just every layer that has one of those, just add it in. And you'll see they turn blue to show that we have a keyframe on the currently selected frame of the animation. So these are all our individual frames in sequence. When we highlight them over here, we have our timeline indicator over here, this little diamond itself will turn blue. So there we go, we've added all of those to the first and last frame. So whatever we do now with the rest of the animation, the first frame and the last frame will stay identical. So we don't really want to touch these anymore. We want to make sure these are, we're happy with them. So now we're going to come to the very middle, and we're going to switch this guy up so that he is in the opposite end of his stride. So right now his left leg is forward, right leg back. We're going to swap these around. So the left leg is back. And that right leg is forward. Do the same for the arms. Pull these forward. Pull this arm back. And now when we play, we will see that we have the very basics of a walk cycle. So that's not too bad. The arms going back and forward, the legs going back and forward, and it is looping seamlessly. It's just a little bit lifeless at the minute, so we want to add a few more things just to make it look more convincing and give it a bit more character, a bit more pizzazz. So let's first of all add a little bit of movement to the torso. So we're going to come to this middle frame here. Again, we don't want to touch the first or the last frames. We want to leave those as they are. This middle frame is fair game. So we're going to go to the torso, and we are just going to rotate it forward a wee bit. Now there's something missing here. Notice how my pupils aren't connecting up. I might have just missed something here. Let me see. Pupil controller, yes. Pupil controller just goes to head. There we are. Now if I rotate that, everything's good. There we go. So we're just going to add a little bit of movement here. That torso in the middle. And now when we play through, there we are. And we might do the same just to the head. Grab the head. And we'll tilt it back this time. Starting to get a little bit of character in there. Now right now the legs are looking just a little bit flappy, just like they're flapping about. What we need to establish is the crossover of the legs, make this look correct. So one thing to be aware of, if I just pause this, if we look at this little diagram of a walk cycle here, is that the height of the body constantly changes during a walk cycle. When the legs are at their widest, the character should be sort of at their lowest, and at the crossover point where the leg is straight crossing over, this is where the head would be near its highest. As you take that step, you kind of bob up and down. So we want to add a little bit of this bobbing movement to our character. How we're going to do that, we're going to take the hips and we're going to leave them where they are at the first, the middle, and the final keyframe. We're going to leave that height as it is. But what we might do is come to about the 7th frame here. And for the hips and the hips alone, we're going to use the position keyframe. So we hit P on our keyboard to show position. And we will actually just activate keyframe mode for position. We'll go to the middle frame. We'll hit that little diamond to keep this position. We'll go to the final frame. We'll hit that little diamond to keep that position where it is. So of our 3 main keyframe positions we have, the hips are going to stay there. We're going to come in between those now, and we are just going to slide these hips. Let me see, at the widest there, we'll just bring them down ever so slightly. So we click on the Y value here, which is the up and down value, and we're just going to lower it ever so slightly. It does not need to be very much at all, just the tiniest wee amount. And over here we want the same bob and movement. So our easiest way to do that is just select this individual keyframe, hit Control C on your keyboard and Control V, and that will paste it over here. Now when we hit play, we'll see we've got a wee bit of bob up and down of the hips. And the final wee thing we want to do is make sure that we get a good crossover on the legs. So at this point, let me see, this is the right leg coming forward. So I'm going to take that right shin and just rotate it back so it's doing more of a pull through of the knee. And here on this leg we'll do the same, so that this near leg is also pulling through like that. And I'll just give a wee bit of change to the walk cycle, look more like he's pulling those legs through with power. And we just want to then fix the crossover point on the leg that's touching the ground. So here we will just take that leg that's touching the ground and make sure it is got nice solid contact with the ground. Now it's going to be that rear leg. Just make sure it's got good solid contact with the ground. Just get that toe, make sure it's nice and flat as well. And if we watch the whole animation now, this should look pretty good. So rather than the legs just sort of flapping wildly from their extreme positions, now that foot touches the ground and sort of springs off a wee bit. We get the motion up and down, we get the torso going back and forth, and we get the head bobbing. That's looking a bit nicer. Okay, I'm pretty happy with this walk cycle. There's one last thing I want to do. I want to make this cape flap back and forth. So we're going to use a technique known as puppet pin animation. And this is great because it can be used for softer items such as cloth, or if we're doing monsters or fish or something like that, you could use it to make the fish bend. Tentacles, make them wave about and stuff. With the cape, what we're going to do is we're going to select it first of all. Now we've got it connected to the torso, but we haven't animated it. We're going to go up to our toolbar here where it says Puppet Pin Tool. And let me just zoom in here. We're going to select that Puppet Pin Tool with the cape selected. We're just going to place about 5 or 6 pins on this cape. I'm just clicking and you'll see that it adds these little yellow circles. These are pins. Now I've added one up here at the neck where the cape connects, and I've added a few others. What we do now is if we look back on that cape layer, we'll see that we have some more information in there. We've got the puppet tool, we've got mesh 1, and if we open mesh 1 to where it says deform, we'll see that we have each of those wee pins that we have placed. So I'm just going to bring my timeline back to the very start. And if we expand each of these out, you can see that we have keyframes. Keyframe mode is already active, and it will already put a keyframe in there. Now, I had my timeline over here. As I say, for a looping animation, we always want to be on the first frame and the last frame to be the same. So let's take these pins that were, or take these keyframes that were added to those pins. Let's just select them all and just drag them back to frame number 1. Then we'll go to our final frame and we will just click our little grey diamonds here just to add in those same position keyframes. So we haven't moved anything yet, we just want to make sure that the first and the last frame have the exact same position. Now what we'll do is we'll come to that middle frame, and if we select each individual pin, we can drag it around, and you'll see what it's doing. It's actually distorting that cape, giving us that nice distortion that we couldn't get on the other limbs. They're just sort of fixed solid shape, but with these puppet pins we can actually bend that cape. So we're not doing too much bending here. Let's give it a bit more of a dramatic bend. Let's actually move you down like that. Now be careful because you can't actually bend it too far. If you bend it too far it will break the shape. But let's just do something a bit more obvious with it, just to see that the animation's working. We can see there with every loop of the cycle, that cape is now bending and flexing. Those puppet pins are stretching the asset out of shape. and we can see there it's just breaking the outline a wee bit, so we'll just move that back like so, and we're getting a little bit of bend and flex on that cape now. Notice how this pin at the top is keeping it pinned so it stays attached. Okay, I am pretty happy with that. If we wanted to export this now, we would just deactivate that background layer. Let's just stop the preview here. We will go to File, Export, Add to Media Encoder Queue. And Media Encoder is a separate wee program that will take a few minutes to open up. So we'll just pause the video until that is open. So here we are. Media Encoder has opened. It'll take a few seconds to initialize up, and it will show you this little blue line here. This is where we can export our After Effects project. It will default to save it as a H.264, just a standalone little video file. But we don't want to do that. We actually want to save this as a PNG sequence. So if we click on that little H.264, it will open up this separate window, and we can choose what format we want to export this as. I actually want to export this as a PNG sequence. So we just change that to PNG, and down at the bottom here, if this was a bit smaller, we can just hit OK. Then we just want to click on the output file here and choose a location for it. Hit OK. And down at the bottom, again, why is this coming in so big? I have no idea. We just want to hit this little green arrow here to start the export. And we'll see the timeline here is just going to go through each individual frame until we have them all. It shouldn't take too long, just a few seconds. And when we are done, we will find that we have each individual frame here exported individually. Now, as I say, our purpose for this, the course I teach is for game design. So we will take each of these frames and drag them into our game engine and make a flipbook or a 2D animated sprite animation from that. But that is us. That's as far as we want to go today. We've got a nice animation there. And if you want to do other animations from this, you just take your master composition, Control C, Control V, and then start the process again for those different animations and export them in exactly the same way. Okay, I'm going to leave it there. I think I've covered everything. Thank you very much for watching. I hope that was useful to you, and I will see you next time. Thanks, guys.